What up, guys? Does Bethany's testimony contradict Dylan's? Is the timeline off, and were there multiple male voices and assailants in the King Road home that fateful night? I've got all the details, so let's get right into it.
Is this a fishing expedition? Is this a strategy? What do you make of this request?
I don't think it's a fishing expedition, and I'll tell you why. The fact that they cut a deal to meet in another state leads me to believe that, in fact, she does have information, and they didn't want to get into a battle about it and that's why they compromised. I don't see any reason. If you honestly believe, if you're representing her, that she didn't have anything and it was a fishing expedition, you would have gone through with the motion to quash or litigated the subpoena and the ability to drag her there. So my guess is, and this is totally a guess, that it either has to do with the timeline or with somebody else who was present either before, during, or after.
Wow, so lots to unpack in this segment. Did Bethany factually hear and or see things differently from what Dylan stated in the PC affidavit? In order to properly assess this topic, let's circle back to the beginning in the aftermath of the slayings on November 13th, 2022. As we know, both ladies were interviewed by cops multiple times shortly after the murders and provided sworn legal affidavits. It is my belief that Bethany's affidavit has been sealed and withheld from the defense by the prosecution this entire time, and I'll explain why I believe that over the course of this segment. In the PC affidavit, which was the basis for Mr. Kohlberger's arrest, Dylan's testimony was largely included, whilst Bethany barely at all. All we really know about Bethany from that legal filing is that she was at the Sigma Chi party with Ethan and Xana from approximately 9 p.m. to 1:45 a.m. and was, quote, inside the King Road residence at the time of the homicides. As one might expect, both ladies lawyered up shortly after the murders and have mostly stayed out of the public eye. Dylan is reported to have stayed in the Moscow area while Bethany returned home to Nevada. Now, let's examine this legal flowchart, which will help us to better understand the context and chain of events I'm about to discuss. First, there was an arrest, next an arraignment where Brian stood silent, and in January 2023, a preliminary hearing was set for June 26th. A preliminary hearing, sometimes called a probable cause hearing, is analogous to a mini trial where both the prosecution and defense would be present. Witnesses could be called and cross-examined. No jury, but rather the judge would make a ruling as to whether there was sufficient evidence of probable cause to proceed to a trial. Important to keep in mind, this hearing is not about guilt or innocence, but rather the validity and legal admissibility of sufficient evidence to formally establish probable cause to move the legal proceedings forward to trial. In those early months of 2023, it was logical to assume that both Bethany and Dylan would be witnesses for the state at the preliminary hearing in June. However, in a bombshell filing in April 2023, the Kohlberger defense team stated, quote, Bethany Funke has exculpatory evidence and filed a subpoena for Bethany to return to Idaho from Nevada to testify as a material witness for the defense. Richard Batanti, Ann Taylor's lead investigator, stated, quote, during the course of my investigation, it has become known to me that Bethany Funke has information material to the charges against Mr. Kohlberger. Portions of information Ms. Funke has is exculpatory to the defendant. So let's think about this. We have Dylan as a witness for the state. Now we have Bethany as a witness for the defense. Why would that be? Logically, it 100% makes me believe because their testimonies contradict one another. So this is where it starts to get really interesting. Bethany's attorney immediately responded with a motion to quash. Bethany did not want to return to Idaho to testify. Just 5 days later, however, as Mark Garagos was discussing in the opening segment, Bethany struck a deal with the Kohlberger defense team for an interview in Nevada in lieu of returning to Idaho to make a personal appearance as a witness at the preliminary hearing in June. The biggest shock of all was yet to come, however. The prosecution almost immediately switched gears and blindsided the defense by secretly impaneling a one-sided grand jury specifically for this case, which indicted Mr. Kohlberger on May 17th, just 3 weeks after the interview was arranged, replacing the planned preliminary hearing in June. Important again to clarify, the grand jury is secret and one-sided. Usually just the judge, a deputy, and a prosecutor with a set of grand jurors. Only the prosecution is present, no defense attorneys, no Dylan or Bethany. The burden of proof is probable cause, which was the same threshold required for law enforcement to secure the arrest warrant for Brian. Also, very intriguingly, the Cobra defense team stated they learned from the transcripts of the grand jury proceedings that 6 of the grand jurors did not think that the evidence provided was sufficient to indict on probable cause and asked for more evidence, but were denied. It remains unknown as to whether or not the defense was ever able to interview Bethany, as the interview was basically a condition of the planned preliminary hearing. So was the grand jury a checkmate move by the state to continue to deny the defense access to Bethany, as I believe they have denied access to her original affidavit? Finally, circling back to my most recent segment, I outlined a series of Reddit posts and an interview clip made by Chapin family members shortly after the murders. These posts are highly critical of Dylan and also seem to call into question the timeline outlined in the PC affidavit. So could the source of the Chapin's intel been Bethany? And would that also explain why the MPD did not include Bethany's version of events in the PC affidavit? So taking the totality of this intel into consideration, do you believe that Bethany's testimony factually contradicts Dylan? And does she hold exculpatory evidence that tells the real story of what went down inside 1122 King that fateful night? Talk to me.